Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. This is your host, Roy. Of course, we're the podcast that brings you a wide variety of topics and with a diverse set of guests. I hope we can talk about things that maybe you've never thought about, or at least give you someone to turn to if you have issues that are keeping you up at night. Today, we are welcoming Jeff Chatterton. He is a high stakes risk and crisis communication specialist and the author of the best-selling book Leaders Under Fire: The CEO's Survival Guide to Navigating Corporate Crisis. His work handling high-stakes situations has taken him all over the world, from Sydney to Stockholm to the Serengeti. Whether it's a chemical spill, a bull water advisory, or controversial management decisions, Jeff is no stranger to controversy in the public eye and navigating the intense world of highly stressed stakeholders. He has repeatedly been described as the guy you want in your corner when the spotlights turn on you. The mayor is on line one and CNN is on line two. He's the calm voice who helps clients navigate and promote their version of the truth. This is an especially invaluable skill set when that very same truth is at risk of being crushed by fear and public criticism. Jeff, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. We certainly appreciate it.
Hey, typically the standard answer on that is, "Hey, I'm glad to be here." I'm wondering if anyone ever says, "You dragged me here." I had no choice.
Yeah. The guy standing camera right with the gun pointed at you there. uh, and this is such a timely situation. I mean, I think, as old as I am, used to things didn't make it out to the spotlight unless it was a national disaster. But nowadays, I'm telling you, it seems like these little bitty things, they have a way of, with social media, of coming out, getting out in
Well,
front of us.
and a little bit is social media, a little bit is the technology, a little bit is the culture we live in. But if you think about it, if you're in charge of communications for Bob's ABC manufacturing company, and you get a call from your local NBC affiliate saying, "Hey, we understand that your VP's been doing something ugly and nefarious." You go, "Absolutely, we want to be fully open and transparent with you. Why don't you bring a crew by and at 11?" So that's 9 a.m. You've got an hour and a half to call up your CEO and your president and your shareholders, your investors, and say, "Hey, we've got something bad. We're dealing with it." You've got a couple hours to prep, your mental space. You can clean up the warehouse. You've got everything going on. They finally go to air at 6 p.m. that night, and then it goes into the newspaper the following morning.
Yeah.
That's old school, and it's old school thinking. And frankly, a lot of the crisis mechanisms that are out there haven't been updated. Like, the idea of a crisis communications plan is laughable in today's day and age, because today you get a call from your local NBC affiliate saying, "Hey, your VP's been caught in the men's room with a 4-year-old," or something completely heinous. It's already on Twitter. It's already on social media. And I bet that NBC affiliate has a much bigger social media following than you do. Then it gets retweeted, then it gets caught, and before you know it, you've gone viral, and it's 9:15. Right. That's the environment we live in. And if you're sitting there in charge of your corporate reputation, that old school static crisis communications plan sitting on your mid-level manager's filing cabinet that you paid $50,000 to some consultant 3 years ago for, it's not helping you right now.
Right. Yeah. And I guess, back in the olden days too, I think media tried to do the verification. Let's make sure this is the real deal because, John Smith, your VP is named John Smith, but this John Smith is somebody else. So you get thrown into the spotlight. Used to, they did a lot of double checking and verification of stories, but with the blogger world and well, with anybody with the social media account being able to blow out anything, it's like, it happens immediately, and there's not always those checks and balances that maybe there were at one time.
There is no distinction, whether it's a reporter, whether it's a member of the public, whether it's a blogger or anything else. It doesn't matter anymore. They have access to the same tools and the same technology, and therefore the same reach that anyone else did. So it's not the case of the reporters being lazy. It's a case of the reporters having as much competition in the field as anyone else these days. It's no longer their domain.
Yeah, and they're chasing these tighter deadlines as well, which I think they have to push the envelope to, they want to get the scoop out before the neighboring channel next door here gets it out as well.
They're facing unprecedented competition for an increasingly or a decreasingly small advertising pool.
Right.
I feel bad. I would never advise my kids to get into journalism these days. As a former reporter, I would never want people to get into journalism. It's a dying industry. It's a sad state of affairs, but at the end of the day, that's the world we live in.
Right.
So
exactly. Yeah, and I was going to ask you, so how did you find yourself in this space? How, kind of what was your journey? Did you wake up one day and say, wow,
it's the standard joke about crisis communications is, how did you get into crisis PR? By accident. Yeah. I was a former reporter, and got into politics and ended up being the guy on the ground in the middle of the biggest environmental catastrophe in Canadian history. It was a little town of 2,000 people, 5,000 people, sorry, and 2,000 of them were sick from drinking municipal tap water. And then, and that was bad, but where it got really bad was when they started to die. And because it wasn't just a random death that you heard about, it was the town librarian died, the town police officer's 2-year-old daughter died, right? And this entire town is in chaos. It's the lead story across Canada. It was actually the lead story across North America for about 3 days. This is back in 2000, and I was the guy on the ground for the entire provincial government, Canadian, so it was provincial, which is very similar to a state, for those who are unfamiliar. Primarily because I was from up there. That was it. That was my sole credential. But I ended up being the guy on the ground handling all of the communications, and then ended up getting into the private sector. And then a year to the day later, I remember, because instead of having anniversary cake in the boardroom, we sat in the boardroom and watched the Twin Towers come down. And so we were doing a lot of work for the US Navy at that point. We were doing a lot of different crisis communication-y type stuff, and the whole world changed after 9/11. And 20 years later, I'm still here, still running, still plugging away, and dealing with a whole new world, and which is even more different now in a post-pandemic environment.
Yeah. So have you seen these? Have you seen like an increase in the crises that y'all tend to handle, or is it pretty much pretty level? Or I guess each year brings a new set of circumstances.
Funny because the opportunities to get into any of the physical crises are there's only, so here's a little secret for all your listeners out there. There's only 3 types of crisis. That's it. Anyone who tries to overcomplicate this is just trying to overcharge you. But there's a threat to yourself. If you're at a concert and there's a bomb, that is a threat to self. Drinking poisonous tap water, that is a threat to self. Anything that is going to affect your physical well-being, or your family's well-being, that's a problem. There is a threat to your wallet. My credit card information has been hacked. The CEO of this company has been stealing money. That is a threat to shareholders. That is a threat. And the third and it's the biggest one, and it's the vaguest one, is it's a threat to my feelings. And those are tough. That's when, if someone came out and said something offensive about the LGBTQ community in the middle of Pride Month, whatever, it doesn't matter what the scenario is. And what I have discovered, because we're not going to concerts, we're not going to baseball games, we're not going to, so those crises, they've gone down. Everyone's staying at home, being safe, wearing masks, but the number of threat to feelings crises has skyrocketed. People are, if I can say it, at the risk of being blunt, people are pissy. Out there. People are angry.
Yes.
And we're seeing that all over the place. And where I strongly believe that the politicians, and all politicians of every stripe, they're fueling the flames. And this is why I think back last summer, we had riots in the streets. There was a really legitimate issue that was being discussed in regards racial injustice. Absolutely. No one wants to take away from that. We need to have a national conversation about the issues of racial injustice in the country. But there were riots. There were people shutting down downtown cores. There were, people physically getting hurt. And I think it's because everyone's starting from a place of anger. There's just no room for error. And if you're a company out there and you thought you had the room to get away with something, it's an ugly wake-up call when you discover there is no room, there is no benefit of the doubt anymore. That benefit of the doubt is long since evaporated. That's what I'm finding.
Yeah, and it's strange you mentioned that, because me and my girlfriend were talking about that just the other day, that it's like everybody is just angry, and it's a little different, but like driving on the roads, Friday afternoon at 3:00, 2 drivers pulled off on the shoulder, got out, had a big shootout right there in Friday afternoon traffic. And, one guy in one car had his kids in the car. So, I don't know the entire circumstance surrounding it, but people just, when you go into the stores, there's just this underlying anger for everything. It's kind of crazy. But, that you mentioned that. So when people feel wrong by a company, I guess with social media, it makes it a lot easier to band together to harm them economically by boycotting and different things like that. What are some other, I guess, tactics that people are taking to try to extract revenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everyone's heard about and is complaining about cancel culture.
Yeah.
You found out you've done something bad from 3 years ago. Sometimes you discover that it wasn't even a bad thing, but it's too late. The damage is already done. Because everyone does have a voice, and everyone is starting angry.
Yeah.
And when you see an opportunity to act out, to lash out at someone, people are taking it. It's anyone who's ever been married knows that sometimes you have full-on pitched arguments over something completely stupid. The biggest argument I ever had in my married life was over a couch, and for the last 15 years we had an expression: it's not about the couch. Because it's not.
Right.
But that's the environment we live in. You have to remember, when we're dealing with people who are furious over something that you've done, it's not about the couch. It's not about what they've actually done. You have to remember, you're starting on the downhill. And unless you're prepared to acknowledge and communicate appropriately that way, it's not going to work. It's a brand new world. It's your marketing communications team doesn't have any experience in this. It's a different world out there.
Yeah, we've kind of expanded, back when I was growing up, it was, the man was the government and maybe the big corporations. But I think that there's been so many disenfranchised individuals, uh, from race to religion to age, even, that there's just I guess, an undercurrent of that. And that instead of it being the government and the big corporations, that's kind of trickled down to just anybody and any company. It doesn't matter the size anymore.
If you're looking for a reason to get offended, you will find it. I don't care how privileged you are.
Right.
In your head, in your prism, you're being hard done by.
Yeah.
And it's not our job as communicators to prove that they're wrong.
Right.
Right. And that's where it doesn't work. Yeah. What the world frankly just needs a bucket ton more of is empathy.
Right.
We just need the ability to say, hey, you know what? I've asked myself that same question, Roy. I've looked in that because I know what's important to you. Here's what I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Boom. It
Yeah.
just, you can take the temperature down. Right.
Yeah, and I was reading some of your material, and I told you this pre-show that what really struck me about you is that you mentioned that you want to be able to get the truth out, which
Yeah.
that's that's an awesome quality these days, because so many people aren't necessarily worried about the truth. We worry about, can we shield this until the news cycle turns over one more time, and then we're kind of out of it. And that it's a smaller scale, but there was we're talking about online ratings. And so, a local company got a bad one, and instead of coming on and saying, yeah, you know what, we may have had a bad day, what can I do to make this right, he actually yeah, started attacking the guy like, well, you're an idiot, you're a crazy customer. And I was like, oh man, we just took, a flame of a match and we just blew it into this bonfire because of that reaction. And I think the word is a good word that you used, is empathy. As business people, we have to have empathy for people, because we have bad days. We're not going to be perfect every time.
And what I think we forget is, in the spite of all the anger that's out there, how tremendously capable the public is of forgiveness
Correct.
if you give them the room to forgive you.
Right.
And it's usually, it doesn't matter how heinous an offense is, frankly. For the last 2 years, you've had the best I was joking with clients. I said, you can go out and sacrifice virgins in your parking lot, and if people are complaining about it, you just shrug your shoulders and go, COVID. And they're
Yeah.
going to go, oh, hey, COVID, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what you're doing right now, but you need to give them the room to forgive you. And it's a one-time deal. If you have an amusement park and you kill some of your passengers, it's fine. You can get away with that. You ask for forgiveness. You prove how it's not going to happen again. The problem is, if it ever does happen again, you're done.
Yeah.
That now you don't have a communications problem. You have a legitimate toxic ride issue. Yeah.
So as we come out of COVID, speaking of that, as we come out of this, are y'all kind of bracing for a lot more activity with this underlying anger, and then everything starting to open back up again, thinking that there may be a lot more going on?
I think what we are seeing is, and I'm calling it the sugar effect. You give a bunch of 12-year-olds nothing but Kool-Aid full of sugar for an afternoon, and then you let them free. They're gonna go absolutely ballistic. They're gonna run around and run a marathon on you, right, until they hit that wall, and then they're gonna crash. And I think what is happening now, you take an entire population, you constrain them, you tell them you can't travel internationally, you can't do this, you're not allowed to go to professional sports, you can't go see Taylor Swift in concert, you can't do all of that. There's this massive pent up desire to go do all of the things that we haven't been allowed to do.
Right.
But then we're going to hit that wall. And I don't think a lot of companies have really thought about what that means in the future. We have just spent a year being told it's dangerous to touch other people. if your business depends on putting, 10,000 people in a room and then sending them out again,
Right.
you're going to be okay for a month, maybe even 6 months. But eventually there's going to be a reckoning. There's going to be people who are like, yeah, you know what? I don't necessarily want to go pay money to go see Taylor Swift in concert anymore, or that professional corporate networking event, or to go see the off-track betting horse races, or whatever. There's 1,000 different industries that are all going to be affected by this that haven't quite figured out how yet.
One other thing I was thinking about, the ransomware and people getting into other people's business. And I know that's not necessarily your thing, but the implications, we had a huge pipeline down here that served like the whole Southeast and a lot of the East Coast. And so, I guess it's kind of a responsibility issue. Like, where somebody did something bad to them, sure, we have to realize that, but were they unprepared for
And
that?
and that's what I tell clients. It doesn't matter what it is, and I'm familiar with the issue. The pipeline that got Bitcoin ransom hacked. So there's 2 or 3 things right away that come up. Obviously, it's not their fault that they've been hacked, but then you have to be able to address is it?
Yes.
Were they up on their proper security procedures, or did someone basically leave a back door open and forget to tell us? And if that's the case, that information's gonna come out, so you better be prepared to come out and release it in a way which is open and factual before the media finds it and blows up on you. If you're the Bitcoin community, how did the US government track that transaction? There's some real serious unanswered questions that are going to send some earthquakes and tremors throughout the entire crypto community.
Exactly.
Completely anonymous, secure transactions just got
Very public.
very public and very recalled. And for good reason.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't have been able to happen, and they need to be able to address that. And then you've got all of the other service providers up and down the East Coast. If you're a gym that no longer had the ability to heat or cool your building and you had to close down, you need to be able to talk to your customers and explain it in a way so that they're not blaming you. But there's a lot of delicate dancing that goes into these things. You can't just stand there and point the finger at someone. You have to be able to own your piece of the pie.
Yeah, and there was a good book Ted Koppel wrote about this, the vulnerabilities that we have in a lot of areas. And I just, you kind of hold your breath thinking, when's that going to happen? And, are these companies preparing for that? And then, of course, we had our own crisis with the ERCOT, our reliability council in Texas back in February, when, we basically lost power for 5 days. And I mean, it was a lot of devastation, and they're still fighting through that. I mean, all the local news channels are still running series on that. Okay, and here's the thing: they've come out and assured everybody, it was a fluke. They placed things down for maintenance, but then a couple weeks ago, it's 80 degrees, and they start sending out alerts again. Hey, you might want to conserve because we're in trouble again. We're in trouble at 80 degrees. And, here we're, usually into the hundreds very quickly. So that messaging, it makes people very confused because they didn't own up and take responsibility from it from the beginning. But then they haven't really cleaned up their house, but they keep telling everybody, yeah, everything's good.
Well, and sometimes what I have found is that it's the regulator, especially a public sector government agency where no one actually wants to take ownership or any sort of level of responsibility. And yeah, I just said what I said, but that's my experience. Where now they're being ultra careful, and they don't want to be blamed if anything goes wrong. But the problem with that is you're crying wolf.
Yeah.
And we saw that absolutely. We saw this in the first 3 months of COVID. Well, don't do this, don't do this, yes, do this, don't do this. No, we need to have a clear, concise message.
Right.
Even and if it's going to change, that's okay, but you need to tell people, hey, this is why it's changed. Here's what we've learned. Here's what we're doing. Here's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
Right. And none of that was happening.
So when things go bad, and I don't want to insinuate that the truth doesn't need to come out. I think the truth always is the best medicine. But how do you balance what you release when you release it? Because like you said, you can hold some things back, but if the media gets wind of it, then you kind of get, they catch you on it. So do you just, as the facts become available, do you just recommend that, hey, we need to release it and get it all out there?
I'll give you my favorite consultant answer, which is that depends.
Yeah.
Every situation is a little bit different. And this is why, when we wrote the book because we were sick and tired of seeing static crisis communicate. Every CEO has been told since the dawn of time, oh, there's, really, really important to have a crisis communication plan. Oh, you need to have a crisis plan. That crisis plan is going to run you between $10,000 and $50,000, and it's going to sit on a mid-level manager's shelf somewhere, and it's going to be static, and it's not going to actually help you if it's on fire. Right. Every situation is always a little bit different, and what, frankly, makes so much more sense. Take all those resources. There's a better, cheaper, more effective way of doing that. Go find a perspective buddy who can walk you through that. Someone who can sit there and go, okay, so you've got this problem and this problem, this problem. All right. So Roy, the issue here is that if people find out that this hasn't happened, that's going to be way worse. And you hadn't maybe considered that at that point. That's not something that you're going to find out in the crisis communications plan. Mm-hmm. All right. So we're going to make the decision to take a soccer ball to the face rather than a bullet to the head. Right. We're going to go and we're, and let's have that conversation on Thursday of this week, and then announce what we're doing on Tuesday, or whatever. But at no point does, well, let's just bury it and hope that no one finds out about it. That's not allowed to be part of the conversation, because frankly, it doesn't work. Yeah. It just never, ever, right? Trust me. I get paid for results. I don't get paid on some sort of moral high ground. I'm better than you. We all need to tell you. I'm, what? Yeah, the truth is a good thing. But frankly, if I'm going to be really blunt, the reason I advocate telling the truth is because if you don't tell the truth, it is toxic. It is deadly. That's not anything you can recover from. Yeah. It has nothing to do with the morals of the situation. I'm trying to save my client here. Right.
Yeah, so what are some tips, that you could give, give managers of even mid-sized to smaller companies? And then, I think something you brought up is, I guess that's why a good reason to engage somebody like yourself as these crises, or as things come up, we can be in communication to say, hey, this thing just happened. What do you think? Is it going to be something that we need to, go ahead and address now? Can we give it some time? How do we handle each and every situation that comes? I mean, hopefully, I don't know. I was going to say, hopefully we're running our business well enough that that's not the case, but then sometimes things outside of our control, influence that it's not that we're running our business poorly, just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, yeah, that's called life. There's nothing, no shame in that. That happens to everyone. Yeah, that's one of the services that we decided to start offering a couple of years ago. Is it's almost like crisis communications insurance. It's a flat rate monthly. God forbid you actually need us. It's already paid for. It's looked after you. We've got your back. You can call us at 3 a.m. on Christmas Day. Someone knows you. They know your media market. They know, what your company does. They can sit down and say, okay, Roy, you're going to be tempted to say this. Don't say this right now. What you want to say is this, and I'm going to be on a plane. Can you come pick me up at Dallas Fort Worth International? And I'm going to be there for the next 2 weeks. We got your back. We'll get you through this. So that's been a big hit. The shameless plug time, though, in terms of helpful tips, go to leadersunderfire.com. I'll send you a copy of the book for free. Leadersunderfire.com. I'm going to ask for a couple bucks just for postage and handling, but the book itself, I paid for it. I will happily give it out to the world. I want to make sure that people get that. The other stuff that I run into, for heaven's sake, please make sure someone on your team is the designated spokesperson, B, trained in crisis communications, not media training. Media training is very different than crisis communications training. And C, has the freedom to do their job without running through 65 layers of approval and red tape and bureaucracy.
Right.
In the middle of a crisis, there is no excuse for not acting quickly. And you should have someone who has the freedom, the skills, and the ability to communicate. And that alone is going to solve 2/3 of your problem.
Yeah, because kind of building on that is that once you have a crisis, you're kind of behind the 8 ball to start going down through the yellow pages to find if there's a local crisis management, because it's like, they expect answers very soon. And I don't know what's worse is going on the evening news, with the statement or we reached out to them and there was no
comment. And frankly, it's this was one of the reasons we came up with our insurance policy, this program called Crisis Tether, because we were sick and tired of seeing good companies get into that same situation. They reach out to their local marketing company that also does SEO and also does this and also promises to do crisis stuff. And we're like, okay, well, good luck. But then they're charging you $300, $500, $1,000 an hour. And frankly, they're not incentivized to make the problem go away. Are you kidding me? They're milking you for $500 an hour. They need to do a full report. They need to bring on extra people. They need to do all this stuff. In the spirit of professionalism. And no, sometimes good enough has to be good enough. It's the wrong business model. If your crisis guy is charging you hourly, you need to have a real blunt conversation about whose interests they're truly serving.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important because of the trust factor. I mean, trust in doing business, especially if you're a professional services company, it's that trust that you have with your clients. And so if a crisis comes up and there's no comment or there's a crummy comment, then how have you affected your clientele? Are they going to be, whether you're right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter. It's a perception. And sometimes our perception of that company is it gets shaken, and it's like, well, I don't trust them enough that I'm not going to do business with them. So, this is important. And I really feel like this is going to be even more important as we start getting back to normal. Just because we have so many disenfranchised people, there's just so much stuff going on in the world. You can't escape it.
Perception is reality. And I hate using political examples, but frankly, if Donald Trump had invented the cure for COVID himself and was able to prove it, and the point where everyone knew that he was right, there are still 50 to 60% of the population out there that would not do it.
Right.
Because of perception.
Right.
It's a problem he brought on himself for the most part, but that's the world we live in. Anyone who says perception isn't reality isn't living in reality.
Yeah, well, that's what they always say is my perception is my reality. So, yeah. And it definitely is. And, like I said, it's not that we make it. Sometimes we don't even have to make a decision, guilty, not guilty. It's more just that there's enough stuff swirling around here. We need to just move on. So,
yep.
Anyway, well, Jeff, we appreciate the time and coming on and discussing this. First off, what is a tool or a habit? What is something that you do daily that adds a lot of value, either professional or personal?
Uh, as the one thing I'm not as good at it as I used to be, and I keep I keep trying to build that muscle. I discovered about 3 or 4 years ago the power of just taking 10 minutes, and I don't even like calling it meditation. It's just a recentering. Like, let let everything go. Just
Yeah,
let it go. Come back and hit stuff fresh. And I it is one thing that every now and then I go, oh, I need to be better at that, because I've seen how powerful that is. Yeah.
it's funny you mentioned that because I started that probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. And, I'm not the best. There's always something swirling around. But what I was telling somebody is like, you kind of have to take the average. Like maybe today didn't work out so good because I couldn't quiet the voices. But, on average, it's just sitting there being quiet, listening to yourself breathe or whatever you need to tell yourself that, it's powerful, and I highly recommend it. If you don't do it, you should start. And like I said, be kind to yourself. That every day is not going to be
Yeah.
optimal.
100%.
All right, Jet. So, who do y'all like to work with? How can you help them? And then, of course, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
As long as you're committed to actually do the right thing, if you're looking for someone who's gonna, help you, uh, lie to the public or to your employees or your stakeholders, I'm not your guy. If you've got an ugly situation, or you want to be prepared for a situation which hasn't happened but may someday, anyone in the private sector who's, dealing with the public or
Yeah.
with their own employees, absolutely. Checkmatepublicaffairs.com is the website. And like I said, if you just want a copy of the book for free, leadersunderfire.com will get you there, and it'll magically show up in your mailbox. A couple weeks later, you'll probably get a bunch of emails from me in the meantime, but that's the price you pay.
Right, exactly. So, that is one question I had written down. Sorry, I'm going to digress for just a minute. But
Mm.
can you go into a company and kind of do those threat assessments, like look at their business, look at things that have happened in the past and say, okay, I don't know, maybe here are three things that may potentially happen, and here's how that we would want to start that ball rolling if it happens. Is there any value in that, or is this stuff just
Oh,
so all
yep.
over the board?
Happens quite a bit. What I uh, so when I was first getting into the industry, that would be crisis communications audit, and it would be 20, 30, $40,000, and it would take a couple weeks, and it would do. And what I found is, quite frankly, that's, again, it's a great way for a consultant to get rich. It's not a good way to prepare for a future crisis.
Okay.
Um, so what I tend to do is, we'll go in and we'll sit down with the client and go, all right, there are three types of crisis. We talked about them. What are those three going to look like? Chances are good. What are we doing? What are, where are the fire extinguishers in our life? Not necessarily physically, but metaphorically. What can we do? And what do we need to do to be prepared to pull that fire extinguisher out?
Yeah.
And I find, you give me half a day with a senior leadership team, and some time with the corporate communications department. If that, most of the time I work better straight up with the C-suite, because they're the ones who are going to get fired.
Yeah.
Frankly, the company may survive, but the CEO is going to get axed.
Right.
And that's not what anyone wants to see happen. Um,
All
and
right. All right, Jeff. Well, thanks so much. Y'all reach out, leaders under fire. And don't wait till the crisis is upon you to start thinking about this. My advice is, get out in front of it, at least have a chat with Jeff, see how he can, be there just in case. We never know. We hope it never happens, but unfortunately, things do happen when we least expect it. So,
Happy to have a conversation. I'm non-threatening, non-fattening. Don't bite unless requested. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, listeners. That's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. You can, of course, find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major social media platforms. Instagram, probably where we hang out the most, also on all the major podcast platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. If we're not on one that you listen to, please reach out. We'd be glad to get it added. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.